All right. So hi everyone. Thanks for coming. This is our third or fourth, I believe, talk series for this fall. Today we have Dr. Tom Sanchez. He is a professor of urban affairs and planning at Virginia Tech. He conducts research in the areas of cities, technology, and scholarly impact. Over the past few years, he has been working in collaboration with the American Planning Association on a series of surveys, papers, and reports addressing the impact of AI on the planning profession. And I believe you put in your bio, you'll be coming to Texas soon, right?
Yeah, I'll be in College Station in January.
Well, welcome preemptively for that. I'll let you
Yeah.
take it away. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great. Let's see. I'll need to share my screen. Okay, slides are showing up.
Looks great.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks for the invitation to talk with you. Um, the over the last several years, I've been focusing on the application of artificial intelligence for urban planning, and not so much as AI embedded into cities like what we're seeing with a lot of the smart city innovation, but my focus has mainly been on using AI for plan making purposes. So for predictions that we make, pattern detection that goes into some of the decision making, and really AI as a tool for looking at cities or urban areas and saying what can we learn, what haven't we been able to observe before with the tools that we've been using that we can now, and hopefully in that process, how can we be a little more accurate? How can we have a little more precision or insight on the dynamics that we're observing in urban areas. And um, uh, so AI and planning is the topic. Kind of, I like to, or I usually would love to start with this image for my talk, because of the kind of the the ideas that people have about AI, and particularly the fear that we have around it, and kind of what's conjured up by that. But I usually will use something a little more friendly and helpful, like this image. But I'm going to talk about a little bit of background, um, some examples that I've come across about AI in planning practice, then kind of a general coverage of methods that I've been looking at. And I think these apply not, well, I think it'll be pretty obvious. These don't just apply to urban planning, but are tools that can help us in a variety of ways to understand urban places as systems. And so I think these tools, and obviously the data that are needed, and the how we put those data together, what that means over time, how we manage it. I think there are lots of changes that are coming our way, particularly as we see AI in practically every aspect of our life today, and a lot of it happening behind the scenes, as we're searching for things on the web, as we're buying things, the advertisements that are coming to us, all of the logistics for delivering packages to, I mean, kind of you name it, it's probably in there somewhere. Not to mention simple things like spell check and grammar checkers and text prediction and all of the kind of in these small ways that were that are just at our fingertips. So some brief history about computers and about me. The Deck Writer 2 in the upper left-hand corner is what I started programming computers on back in about the middle 70s. And so this terminal, there was no display, there was no memory, no storage, and so we had this stack of paper here, and it would print out everything that all the input and all the output would be printed out instead of being displayed on a screen. And so obviously, I mean, that was it was really disappointing when you ran out of your roll of paper, because then you couldn't do anything else. There was no output. You couldn't tell what you were typing in or what it was saying. Plus, this terminal really had no processing power. We connected to it with this modem, this old modem, acoustic coupler at the time, into this this rotary dial phone. And so you would dial up this server, that this timeshare excuse me service that provided the computing, and it made the sounds kind of like a fax machine, and then you would put it on the acoustic coupler, and then that was your modem connection. Needless to say, it wasn't very fast. And then when I got into graduate school, I moved on to this very advanced computer technology, one of these first IBM PCs, no hard drive, very little RAM, but it had two disk drives on it for floppy disks. And on one floppy disk that you put in there, it had the operating system, it had DOS on it. And then in the other floppy drive, you put your program if you were running VisiCalc or what was the spreadsheet that we were using in the day, or whatever program. And so and then I was doing a little bit of GIS at the time as well. And the graphics were really horrible. So here's the output from some kind of topographic map, where it printed out on that paper characters over the top of each other in order to create density, or to create these patterns, give you some kind of visualization of the area that you were looking at. Fast forward to today, I'm, in my hand, I'm holding essentially a supercomputer with literally hundreds of thousands of times computing power and memory, and I'm asking artificial intelligence agent questions about pretty much any topic imaginable. The point of this little history isn't how old I am, but it's about the rapid pace of change that we're seeing. So just in my time, I've gone from this dumb terminal to this handheld supercomputer. And so I think about for you guys, or for my kids, kind of what you're gonna be working with in the future, for personal and professional purposes. And I don't think that we can really imagine what that's, what that's going to be. But and I think I think that's very I personally find it very, very exciting, these advances that we've been making. And for me, the whole objective is to be using better data with better tools to make better decisions or better observations, depending on how you want to look at, decision making, um, or being able to that interpretation or translation of what we're seeing in cities in particular. So a few examples, and when I was working with, I'm still working with APA, but wrote a planning advisory service report, really an introduction to AI for urban planners. I looked high and low across the world for applications, like real live applications of AI that planners were using as part of their as part of their job in the plan making process. And I will have to say, and this has been in the last about 2 years, I found very, very few examples. And I'm sure that that's gonna be changing soon, or over time, as a lot of these platforms and the access to these platforms becomes increasingly better. And as we learn how to utilize these tools as well. So, I'm not sure if it's going to be a generational sort of effect, or if it's going to be kind of the trickle. The one thing that I compare it to is how we saw GIS enter, in particularly for planners, how GIS entered the profession. And it seemed kind of slow. There was new hardware that was needed. Certainly there was training and skills that were needed. But over time, GIS is kind of expected in your resume, or in the among the classes that you take. GIS for planners being required in a lot of programs. And so that's kind of for me an interesting example of the innovation adoption that occurs, the time it takes, and then the impact it has on the profession and on the process. So anyhow, one of the examples here was with sentiment analysis, and Zen City, which is a company and a platform, scrapes social media of kind of everything that they can get their hands on, in order to find out or detect comments, impressions, sentiment about what citizens or residents think about their local government, in this case the city of Long Beach. And so you can imagine, kind of with any social media sources, or I should say also not just social media sources, but also their own community input platforms and public feedback. But they're also scraping kind of any source they can for comments and for feedback. And in that process, they're trying to, they filter out just unrelated comments that might mention the name of the city of Long Beach, or something that's tangential to really what the city is about, and the sentiment of the residents there, or the comments. So in particular, they're looking for comments about public services, about local governance, about quality of life, anything that they can get in order to use as basically public input for the planning process. They also, as a matter of fact, have a very strong smart cities program for those of you that are interested in it, if you want to take a look at that. So So in a single, I think this was for a 2 or 3 year period, over 5 million messages that they scraped and that they analyzed. And through the sentiment analysis process, using lots of natural language processing tools and all, categorize or do some topic modeling on what was being talked about, and then along with that, along with the topic, they're also trying to categorize it as, is this something positive that's being said? Is this something negative, or is this kind of just a neutral statement that somebody made or passed along? And so for a lot of these data for this period, public health was the one of the top concerns or topics that they found, along with violence and crime, national and state politics, and so forth with these others. And this is interesting because what they captured on the public health side was this was happening during COVID. This is when people were asking about information for testing sites, for places where they could go get their the vaccines, questions that they had for local government around that, related to the pandemic. And so that was at the time, that was one of the leading topics. Another example from the city of Tuscaloosa, they've outfitted several of their garbage trucks with computer vision devices. And so I think this is interesting because you think about the garbage trucks, at least on weekly routes, going down pretty much every street or alley. And what they're doing is they're capturing all of this, this visual information. And in their case, what they're focusing on is property conditions and things like code violations. And this isn't really from the perspective of, okay, well, what are all the things that are happening that we can issue fines for? So these cars parking on there, maybe that's illegal, or against local ordinances, we can issue a ticket to them. What they're using it for is for neighborhood improvement programs, where actually they can put resources into these areas to improve property, improve neighborhood conditions, increase property, values and livability. So I think it's interesting from a data collection standpoint, how much, using these computer vision tools, how much information can be collected. So that also includes things like road conditions. So where are potholes, other problems with surfaces. They can look at street planting, street trees, vegetation, the condition of any of the plantings on properties or in public right-of-ways. Well, just imagine kind of all of the different sorts of objects and activities that can be detected, really being used. And from what I'm aware of, this is primarily being used for community development purposes and not law enforcement. And so I think we get into kind of a tricky sort of, or kind of a contentious kind of debate over how this information could be used, depending on what's being gathered and what's being classified. And then a third example, and this being in Texas, Park Hill Consultants, which I think are based in Austin, and I'm working with one of their planners there, Julio Carrillo, and they're looking at reconfiguring and analyzing school district boundaries so that they can keep the school districts balanced in terms of socioeconomic characteristics of the students and the households, also the environmental conditions, kind of infrastructure conditions, things like broadband access, and really using it as a tool to make sure that these school districts aren't becoming too homogenous. And so making sure they've got a mix of kind of, in terms of resource levels of households and schools as they create these boundaries. And so they're using decision trees to use some of the, to use the spatial data that they've collected in order to classify households and look at, what are these mixes of characteristics across households when they're looking at a kind of a district by district breakdown. Okay, so some interesting applications, and like I said, I was looking for applications that are happening on the ground. Certainly, at least from what I've seen, the AI applications are going to be more plentiful in areas where there's lots of data. And so one of those areas is certainly transportation. And so planners, in a survey that I conducted of planners, that was one of the top areas that they expect AI to be helpful, is for transportation planning. And we think of routes and ridership data, kind of origin and destination information about trips that are being taken. And again, we're looking for patterns and how can we optimize what these travel patterns look like, and then match them with the most efficient mode. Okay, so, and then on the menu, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think the four main areas that I identified for use in kind of planning, or kind of applied to urban areas, certainly machine learning, and that has general purpose. The computer vision, like the example that I gave, the neural networks, which matches up with the or part of what we can do with machine learning, but more sophisticated than some of the methods that we use. Think of ordinary least squares regression, logistic regression, even nonlinear functions on regression, and then certainly the natural language processing, and what we're seeing with chatbots and large language models now, and really potentially the huge impact we get that these tools can have on knowledge management. And we think about what plans are generated by local or regional jurisdictions. How can we can essentially convert a lot of that information, a lot of that knowledge, into a system that can be more conversational, that we can say, instead of me looking up an ordinance or a regulation in some kind of a reference, I can have a conversation and say, what are allowable uses in this area? What are the impacts that we've seen in the past from building a stadium, or from certain subdivision, residential subdivisions in certain parts of the city. So we're going to be able to accumulate this knowledge and then access it more, in a more natural way. And so the coming to the end here, for me, some interesting questions were, okay, I'm looking at these tools, I'm looking at this technology, but and I'm trying to match this up for as tools and things that planners can use. I have to step back and say, well, what does a planner actually do? What are the thought processes? What's the information that's used? What kind of connections need to be made? And we've got, planners that have to be able to talk with designers and architects and civil engineers. And with using these technologies, they have to be able to talk to, or should be able to talk to, computer scientists and technologists to make sure these tools are, are the right fit for the job, and that they're appropriate, and we're avoiding things like bias from past activities and decisions that we've made, and be able to look at these things critically. How do we prepare? That's a great question. Well, we've got to know about we've got to know about this stuff. What are the capabilities? What are the limitations? What are the appropriate uses? And how does that work fit into our current and future workflows? We're also seeing that there's a good deal of fear out there about what AI, could do to certain professions, and whether if that's changing jobs, eliminating jobs, eliminating a lot of the work that we rely on people to do now. Certainly, some of these are very important for us to be looking at. And we see it in the writer's strike right now, and the UAW strike right now. We've got AI taking over, and what the concerns about what it has, the effects on the job market. What's next? I don't know. I mean, some of these changes are going to be happening so rapidly. I think the main thing is for us to be paying attention, work across disciplines, and make sure that we are keeping an eye on being ethical and transparent about what tools we are using and how we're applying them. And finally, just to wrap up, in Midjourney, the prompt that I put in was, I want an image of planners, working with some kind of technology or tools, and the image it came back was with a bunch of guys, in the office, with suits on, looking at maps. So that's the best the AI could do in terms of what it thought planners do, and kind of the approach and the professional setting that they were. And I could have provided more specifics on the prompt, but I was just curious what was on the top of its mind as far as what those terms meant. So that's it. I hope we've got a little time for questions and certainly comments from you. But been great to be here and chat with. Oh yeah, and finally here, couple of resources here. APA Technology Division is doing some good work on the tools that are coming out and being applied by planners. There was a recent quick note, one of many publications coming out on ChatGPT from the American Planning Association, and then also the PAS report that I mentioned, that really is an intro level AI primer there, in case you're interested.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I guess I have a question. I can start off here since I'm chatting. You touched on this a little bit with the sort of outcomes about computer vision on the trash trucks in Tuscaloosa, but are there any other sort of specific ethical considerations that come to mind immediately when we talk about integrating AI into sort of actual practice rather than just talking about it in theory and research papers?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big concerns that comes out of that example in Tuscaloosa is kind of a throwback to redlining, and to characterizing certain neighborhoods as as the place where we're not going to make investments or where we're going to steer, certain ethnicities to or away, away from. And so what we don't want to use, tools like that, and not just computer vision, but we don't want to, we don't want to use some of these tools to identify areas as unworthy, um, or somehow flawed, and then them becoming unfavored in the in the planning process. So, and I think when we think about it at the neighborhood scale like that, but then also, what about the information that we're grabbing about people, and whether that's visual or about financial transactions they're making, places that they're visiting, who they might be associated with. And this is one of our big fears around privacy and confidentiality is, are we going to get down to that individual level with things like facial recognition where I can't conduct my my life in a in a private way without these concerns about, hey, I'm going to be my every move is going to be documented. Well, we all know that a lot of our moves with that device that we're carrying around in our pocket are capturing all of that information now, but when it becomes more overt, where everywhere I look, there's a live streaming, camera, that's keeping an eye on me, and there are lots of those there now. But so, but I think a lot of the criticism has been put, is aimed at the technology on this, and I don't think it's the technology that's the problem. It's who's implementing it, and who's in control of of using these tools. And we've got to make sure that there are the ethics in place, whether it's related to technology or any other information that they have, that we're setting some boundaries, and we're making sure that we're protecting stakeholders' rights. And so whether it has to do with technology, or or not. So I think there are a lot of different levels of where these concerns are at, and I think that that's where it's important for planners to know about the technology in order to know about what these concerns are in reality.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I think we have time for another, maybe one quick question if anyone would like to jump in
Or comment.
or comment.
Hi, Professor. Hi. Hi. So first I really thank you for the very good presentation, and it's really impressive. And actually, I'm not going to say myself as a researcher, but I do some research about some machine learning and exploring the impacts of the transportation infrastructure. And most things I have learned is that this is a really powerful method that can help planners to have some, really great insight. But the things I observe is that it seems that most master program, they do not spend a lot of time in teaching students how we are going to learn this kind of new method. While so which my point is that I'm thinking whether there could be kind of like a trend in that in the futures, the US planning program can have more class about machine learning or other things about some AI and technology. So do you think this trend can come true? Or what's your opinion?
You were cutting in and out about that. Can somebody else repeat the question?
Yeah, you were cutting in a little bit out. I think you asked sort of, do you see a trend in which planning programs will implement this sort of into coursework in the future?
Sure.
That get it, Yafu?
Yeah, and I think that matches up with the example of what we saw, or what I mentioned about GIS. It's starting out. There was a few, planning programs that were teaching GIS, and now I've got to imagine all of them are teaching GIS. And that's obviously with the map making, I mean, that's a very practical tool for planners. And AI is so broad, and there's, so much that can, it actually means so many things. I think at a minimum, we need to start with kind of teaching about the language about these tools, generally what they're about, what they can do with terminology, things like that. And then over time, I suspect, that we'll start using it more often. And I think in those areas where we've got lots of data, transportation, and also community involvement, like with that Zen City example. In the survey that I did of planners in the US, and asking them about which area of planning do they think is most appropriate for AI in the future. Well, two questions. Which is the most inappropriate? They said community involvement. And one of the most appropriate, the second one, was community involvement. And that came down to, well, people are saying things, so we want to be able to protect privacy and confidentiality. But on the other hand, if we get lots and lots of information, lots and lots of input, potentially, we're not going to want to continue reading through all of those manually and interpreting them arbitrarily. We would like to use some tools to standardize that. And so I think we're going to probably see it applied in a few different areas slowly, and it will, it'll take time. It'll be your generation that probably, makes this all happen.
Thanks for answering. Yeah, it's really good.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I think we can probably wrap it there. It's a Friday afternoon for folks. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to come speak to us.
Yeah. I'll always enjoy talking about it. And please feel free to, to follow up with me if you have any, any thoughts or questions, or we'll be pursuing a lot of research in this area. And so hopefully there'll be opportunities for, for collaboration and partnerships, and, working together in one way or another. So.
Wonderful.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So long, everybody.